If something is designed, it demands a designer. Somebody designed these glasses. Even though it's 100% natural materials, there's a designer involved. If you're walking along the beach and you see a pair of glasses laying in the sand, you automatically recognize them as designed. You do not recognize them as a natural product of the waves beating on the sand, because glass is made out of sand, you know. It's just obvious there's a designer involved. This is, as far as I know, the world's largest rock group, Mount Rushmore. If you know of a bigger one, let me know. Stone Mountain's pretty big, but I don't know if it's bigger than that or not. Do you think there's any way these four faces could have appeared on this rock by chance? Do you think the wind could have done that? Or the water, erosion? Or maybe thermal expansion of the rock, you know, when it heats up it expands? Or exfoliation where pieces flake off automatically? No, I don't think so. Exfoliation, by the way, Eric, if you use that term in earth science, you see that at the bottom of every rock cliff, like the one we climbed in El Capitan and Devil's Tower, there's a huge pile of broken off pieces. Every year, water gets up in the top in little tiny cracks. The sun will expand it and crack it. Water gets in and freezes, pops off little flakes. Little pieces are constantly popping off every year, and they end up at the bottom in a big, huge pile. And that's called exfoliation. I don't know how to spell it. You can look it up. But that's a process where this stuff... So I always say, do you think wind or water or exfoliation or thermal expansion caused this? No. This was designed by a guy named Borglum. Took him years and years to build it. Design demands a designer. The evolutionists have never come up with an answer to that argument. They try awfully hard, but they've never been able to answer the simple question, if something is designed, why don't you think there's a designer? There had to be a designer. What they're doing now in the books, and it's pretty tragic that kids have to face this kind of stuff. Here's a 2000 textbook. They are being taught that things have adapted to their environment. That's the word you got to watch now. They use that phrase, adapted. This one says, how are plants adapted to their environment? Then it says, the pitcher plant has adaptations to help it get nitrogen. Why don't they say it was designed? Would you say your car door is adapted to let you into the car? I think somebody designed the car door to let you into the car, right? It's not adapted. This one says, gills are an adaptation to living in water. Why don't they say a design feature? Well, they don't want to use the word design because then some kid's going to say, who's the designer? They don't want to have to answer that question. Now think about this. If gills are adapted, if fish have adapted gills to live in the water, how did they live before they adapted the gills? You say, oh, they didn't live. None of them lived. For millions of years, they all died. That's real brilliant, right?
I always say I'd like to have, I got a few people I'd love to throw in the lake and keep them down there for a few million years and see if they...
Sure, toss them in, see if they can adapt some gills real quick. Yeah, sure, I've met a few like that. When you have a complex structure like a watch, I have a Casio Databank stopwatch. It holds 300 phone numbers. It is a calculator. It's a stopwatch. It's an alarm clock. It's a countdown timer. It does not tell time. You have to look at it. But this is an amazing machine. This is made of 100% natural products. There's nothing supernatural about this. There is not a little man inside here running around changing the numbers on the face of the screen. It all works by simple electronics and mathematics and chemistry and physics. There's nothing supernatural about this. However, this watch is more than just the components. It's more than just plastic and metal and, you know, copper wiring and silicone chips. It's intelligence. It's design. And your body is more than just chemicals. It is designed. It reflects intelligence, intelligent design. Walter Brown's real good. He says, evolutionists argue against design using arguments they designed. Think about that one. That's pretty good. A great book to read on this topic would be Darwin's Black Box. Michael Behe is a biochemist, and he goes into the complexity of things. It's a fascinating way he wrote the book, too. He wrote it in, each chapter has 2 sections. Those who just want to get the simple idea is first, and then if you want all the details, the rest of that chapter is the go down deep, stay down long kind of stuff, where you can just skip that if you want, and go to the next chapter. For instance, he takes an entire chapter describing the hair on a bacteria. a bacteria has a little hair on it that whips around and makes it swim through the water, or through its little world. That hair has basically a rotary engine at the bottom that spins. That hair has 40, that rotary engine has at least 40 different parts to it. What's the minimum number of parts to get an internal combustion engine to work? You have to have a piston, you have to have a connecting rod, a crankshaft, a wrist pin, something to hold the explosion, a head, valves to let it in, valves to let the exhaust out, a spark to set it off, some kind of electrical system. I would say if you look at a little tiny remote control airplane engine, for instance, very small, very simple, one cylinder. Doesn't even have the valves. It just has a port. Piston goes down, sucks gas in, squeezes it, throws it out, sucks in new gas. So you've eliminated the valves. Okay. What is the minimum number of parts you could get to have an internal combustion engine work? I don't know what it is, but it's probably around 100. Minimum number of parts. If you remove any one of those parts, it stops working. In Behe's book, he talks about the mousetrap as an example. There are 5 parts that are required. If you take away one of those parts, it doesn't catch the mice. It doesn't work. And he challenges people, would you please try to design a mousetrap that has a spring, a hammer mechanism to hit the mouse, a latch mechanism to hold it back, a platform to nail it to, and staples to hold it down. He says this is called irreducible complexity. It has 5 parts. They all depend upon each other. You cannot take any one away without it ceasing to work. One atheist wrote him a letter and said, "You're so dumb, I can reduce it to 4 parts. I can nail all those pieces to the floor." Well, duh, you just enlarged your platform is all you did. You didn't take away the platform. They get pretty desperate. The idea of complex things that you can't reduce it anymore, it just simply stops working. Now, how many parts on your car have to be there to make it work? Lots, right? How many can you take away to make it stop working? Any one of many thousands of parts, like the key, right? The ignition, the oil, the gasoline. My dad, when he was in Marines in World War II, he was in radar, and they would have to go into the islands after they took them from the Japanese, and they would set up radar bases. And one of the things they did for their training was, since this radar was operated by a diesel engine, their boss would sabotage their engine to make it stop working. And they had to see who could figure out what was wrong and fix it in the fastest amount of time. They would do all sorts of things to these engines. Of course, you pop off the distributor cap and run a pencil around the inside and put it back. Pencil lead is graphite, which conducts electricity. And the spark goes to all cylinders all the time. Well, it doesn't run. He said the toughest one he ever had to find, they took a needle, took 2 spark plug wires, they were touching each other, poked the needle through, and clipped it off and roughed up the rubber. So when it sent the spark to one, it sent it to 2 cylinders. And it ran terrible. And it took them a long time to figure out why. It was a little tiny needle stuck between 2 spark plug wires. And there are so many things you can do for cars. When people get married, you know, you run the coil wire up onto weave it through the fabric of the seat, in the driver's seat. You know, when they hit the key, they get 20,000 volts in the gluteus maximus. We better not teach you guys all that stuff. Anyway, when they let go of the key, though, it stops. And they wonder, what's going on here? But this little, excuse me, this little motor on this hair on this bacteria has at least 40 parts. If you take any one away, it stops working. So how did the individual parts evolve? And how did the bacteria know when it had 35 parts? Man, if I can just get 5 more, this thing's going to start working. How did it know? There's no way it could know. It's irreducibly complex. By the way, that little bacterium motor is so tiny, 8 million of them, of these motors, would fit in the cross-section of a human hair. Take a hair, cut it, the circle, 8 million of those motors would fit on there. Pretty tiny. And it whips around 100,000 RPM.
Does anything we have today do that? I mean, we can't.
100,000 RPM, I don't know. I'm sure there are some things we have, you know, jet engines, turbines and stuff will go that fast. But like your Suzuki Katana 600 had what, red line of 10,000?
That's true. Yeah.
12,000 RPM, 8 or 9 times faster, and this big. And it goes around so efficiently, it moves its little bacteria through the water, the equivalent of a person swimming 60 miles an hour. Now you get a real serious problem. As an object gets smaller and smaller, the fluid that it swims in feels thicker and thicker to that object. It's almost like you swimming through peanut butter. 60 miles an hour. One breath? I don't know about the breath part. Anyway, well, if that little bacteria can swim 60 miles an hour through its little tiny world, which has extremely high, what's called viscosity. Viscosity would be a good quiz question to ask. Viscosity is the thickness of the water. If we had a long, tall glass tube full of water and we drop a marble in, it would fall fairly fast. We could time it. Okay? If we take the same jar, fill it full of honey, drop in the marble, falls much slower. Honey is thicker than water. Alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, is thinner than water. We could drop the ball in a tube of alcohol and it would fall faster. That's called the viscosity. They measure motor oils with the viscosity, 30 weight, 40 weight, 50 weight. 90 weight for the rear end of the car is very thick, heavy oil. The thickness of the liquid is called the viscosity. There's probably a more technical term, the resistance to flow or the resistance to movement or something. But this little bacteria has to overcome incredible viscosity problems. And he moves. I mean, I swam a mile one time in Boy Scouts in about 30 minutes. What's that? How many miles per hour is that? 2 miles per hour. He's swimming 60 miles per hour. We need to sign them up for the Olympics. And yet the textbook says we evolved from bacteria. Well, they're lots better off than we are. We're getting worse, not better. Charlie Darwin said in his book, to suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd. Absurd. This is crazy. How can this happen? Even Darwin recognized this is a crazy idea because the eyeball is so complicated. And you go back again to the idea that design demands a designer. Charles Darwin said to many folks, you know, the eyeball confuses me more than anything. He said, I think this will be the undoing of my theory. This will be what proves my theory wrong. Well, there's a lot of things that prove your theory wrong, Charlie. Common sense will prove your theory wrong. But this textbook says the complex structure of the human eye may be the product of millions of years of evolution. Why doesn't God get the glory for what he made? Why do we all have to pay for the kids to be taught that eyeballs evolved when there's no possible way it can be happen and there's no evidence that it happened? So what are they going to do to the kids in this textbook? What they're going to do, they're going to arrange eyeballs of different types of animals in some kind of order from what they think is simple to what they think is complex. Some eye spots on different creatures only sense light. They're just a little sensitive patch. It just tells if it's light or dark. That's all they can tell. Okay. Some have extremely good vision, like the eagle can read the newspaper at the other end of the football field, if he could read and he cared what's going on. But he has incredible vision. So they arrange these eyeballs in order, and look what they tell the kids right here. You can better understand how the eye might have evolved if you picture a series of changes during the evolution of the eye. In other words, you have to imagine it. See, boys and girls, we'll arrange them in order. Can't you imagine how it could happen? Evolution only takes place in the imagination. Never takes place in reality. You have to imagine how it might have happened. The Bible says very clearly, God formed the eye. Psalm 94. I think God ought to get the glory. Did you know on the back of your eyeball is what's called the retina, the backside that receives the light. That retina has 137 million light-sensitive cells in 1 square inch. How would you like to be the electrician to wire up 137 million connections in 1 square inch? Remember the boxes we wired up for the duplication system? You know, trying to get in there, little wires together. I remember as a kid, my dad got me a kit to build a ham radio, shortwave radio to transmit its transmitter. And boy, all those little connections in there, and now they've miniaturized it much smaller. But even the fastest computer in the world, you get these big computers that have all these little microchips with these zillions of little tiny connections inside. The eyeball's got them beat by a long shot. And they think it happened by chance. If you think about the human eye, that can not only, it can focus very quickly on different objects. I mean, what if you had a camera that could focus that quickly from one object to another? This camera Andrew has back here is automatic focus, but if I stuck something up in front of the camera 6 inches away right now, it would take a fraction of a second to focus. Yet your eye can do it almost instantly. It adjusts for colors, more colors than any camera can ever pick up. Your eye can tell. You can hold up 20 different colors of white. I mean, go to the store and see how many colors of blue and white there are. How many shades of these colors. And your eye can see all this, more than any camera can see. And it adjusts for light, you know, the light intensity, automatically, just bang, instantly. But it's pretty amazing the way it was designed. The one atheist wrote me a letter and said, oh, no, he called me. I was sitting in the office. He called. He said, Hovind, you're so stupid. I don't know how you can believe in creation. I said, what's my other choice? He said, evolution. I said, what makes you believe in evolution? He said, well, the human eyeball is designed backwards. He said, it's built backwards. It can't have been designed. I said, what are you talking about? He said, the light comes into your eye, and it has to go, there's a layer of blood vessels in front of the retina. You can see the blood vessels on the top there. The light goes through those blood vessels before it strikes the retina, which allows you to see what you're looking at. I said, yeah, I knew about that. I taught biology. He said, well, those blood vessels block out some of the light. I said, yeah. He said, well, that's a poor design. He said, the octopus has a much better eye because their blood vessels are behind the retina. Now, he's right. Octopus blood vessels are behind the retina. Human blood vessels are in front of the retina. He's absolutely right. And he says that proves that neither one are designed because it's backwards. I said, well, sir, listen, let me explain something to you. We live in the air. Air does not stop UV light very well, ultraviolet light. UV light will burn your retina. That's why you don't shine lasers in kids' eyes. That's why you don't stand there and stare at the sun for 30 minutes. The UV light will burn your retina. I said, octopus live in the water. Now, water stops ultraviolet light. That's why as you go deeper and deeper, the water seems to change colors. Only the blue light penetrates. Different frequencies won't penetrate at different depths. As you go down, it changes color, until pretty soon, of course, black. Real deep, only the very, very dark blue light will penetrate. Octopus live way down deep. They don't need the blood vessels in front. They're not getting any UV light. So they're designed for the water, and we're designed for the air, because blood vessels block out UV light. I said, if you want to swap eyes with an octopus, you go ahead, but you'll be blind in a few days. I said, do you have any other dumb questions? He said, no, that was it. Click. I get that all the time. I try to be nice to him, but it's, you know, it'd be hard living being that dumb, you know. It is, anyway. What they're saying is, you know, God wouldn't have done it this way, so it must have evolved. Well, maybe you just don't understand why God did it that way. Maybe that's your problem, okay? And even if that, you know, that'd be a lousy argument for evolution.